too. We're on lesson 4. We'll be doing the questions today on that particular lesson. Before we begin, Bobby, would you direct our minds in prayer, please?
Lord, Father in heaven, we humbly thank Thee for this beautiful Lord's Day morning. We thank Thee that we have the opportunity of being able to assemble here to read and to study Thy Word. We pray that we may be very mindful of the sinfulness of harsh judgment, that we might have the proper regard one for another. Please forgive us for our sin, but pray that thou be with the teacher, that thou have a good recall of the things that he studied to present. All things may go well. We have to so live that heaven can be our home. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay. Questions on lesson number 4. Begin with what I always call the fun questions. True and false. So number 1. An encouragement to pray immediately follows the Lord's injunction against judging in the Sermon on the Mount. True. That is coming from section 5, point number 6. And the passage there is what? Matthew 7:7. And Mark talked about that when he went over that particular point. He says, it will be given to you to seek and to find you will knock. Are there any other passages that encourage the prayer in the New Testament? Okay. There's quite a few. Matthew has at least a couple more. Mark has 1. John has, I think it's 6. James 2. And 1 John 3 has 2. So that I found. There may be more. But there are several passages that encourage prayer. So again, that's one of the things that we need to think about, because that's what's going to help us to overcome these heart diseases.
I think Luke gave the parable that men ought to always pray and not to faint.
Right.
Luke 18.
Okay, Barnabas, number 2. Barnabas was such a good man in most respects, but he was beset by the fault of always seeing the worst in people. False. Section 5.5. What was the passages there? Does anybody remember?
Acts 4.
Okay, Acts 9:26 through 31 is the one that Mark went over. Here's where Barnabas did what?
Into the defense of Paul.
Defense of Paul. When Paul came to Jerusalem, they were a little skeptical about him and a little reluctant to accept him. So Barnabas came to his defense, so to speak, and after that, then that was no problem. We also have Acts 15:36 through 41, and there is the situation between Paul and Barnabas overtaking John Mark on the second missionary journey. And we find that Barnabas took Mark with him and went in a different direction from Paul. So again, that was false. Okay, number 3. A person's reputation is not too important. False. That comes through section 5.7. The victim's reputation is is what is being affected there, and it's his influence can be seriously affected from a negative standpoint by some of these false judgments and fault finding. Okay, number 4. Judging is contrary to the very spirit of brotherliness. True. Okay. Section 5.8. Anybody remember the passage there? It's Matthew 7:3. And that's talking about having the speck in your brother's eye when you've got a log or, depending on various translations, in your own eyes, something that's very large. David Lipscomb. Do you have a comment, Mark?
Yeah, I was going to say this question might have been better worded to say harsh or hypocritical
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes these authors get a little ahead of themselves, I think, in developing their questions. And they knew what they were after, but they could actually phrase it a little bit better.
Well, we have the command to judge righteously.
Right, we have the command to judge righteously. David Lipscomb had an interesting comment about this particular passage. He says, "No man is permitted by Jesus Christ to hunt motes in his brother's eye, or faults in his brother's walk and character, while his own is full of much greater sins, and no man can look upon the character and the work of his brother with a censorious," by the way, there's that word again, censorious, bitter, fault-finding spirit. So, again, no man is permitted by Jesus Christ. I think that's kind of worded very strongly, but I happen to agree with him. James 4:12 tells us, "Do not speak evil against one another." And again, he says here, "Do not speak evil one another." But I think you can carry that a little step further. And that is, don't even think about using harsh words against somebody else. And so, therefore, you would not be guilty of that. Okay, number 5. Eliab incorrectly judged David's motive. True. Okay, section 5, point 10. What happened there? What's the passage? 1 Samuel 17, verses 28 and 29 is where the erroneous judgment was done. But how do we know that?
Well, David's father sent him to check on his brothers who were involved in the war, and then David was volunteering to go out against this giant. And his brother thought he was just trying to make a name for himself.
Okay, yeah, the 1 Samuel 17 says that Jesse said to David, "Take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp of your brothers." The brothers were in a military camp because a war was going on. And so that was the instructions for David. But his older brother, Eliab, as verse 28 points out, said, "You've come down to see the battle." So, erroneous. And so we can see that incorrect judgment was made there by Eliab regarding David's intent.
Gerald,
Yes.
can I go back and make a quick comment on number 3?
Okay.
It says a person's reputation is not too important. I was just thinking about the media. You know, the media, there are a lot of times we know that we're constantly seeing stuff where there's a lot of stuff put out. And I think everybody in this room knows a lot of that's not accurate. And a lot of people's reputation has been destroyed improperly. Some, because, there's just one little piece of information, or maybe just part of a video shared or something like that. And they don't know the context of what's going on. And then they're like, and then people are angry, and then sometimes it just explodes into violence and all kinds of stuff. And it all gets stirred up, because there was false accusations. They didn't gather all their, they weren't any interest in really being truthful about it. It was about just being newsworthy and selling newspapers or whatever. Quick example, Annette actually worked for someone in the daycare business where a video was put out publicly on TV. And boy, you talk about destroying the reputation of the daycare. And people were bailing out on the daycare like crazy. Annette had to go get a job somewhere else. And guess what? About a year later, the lady was cleared of all the charges against her, but the damage had been done.
Yeah, Scott brings out a good point. The media sometimes puts out things that are not true. We know they're not true. And if we're not careful, we can be influenced by those. And he used an example there, but I can remember a few years ago, anybody that had a child care business was under scrutiny. And there were a lot of false accusations made out in the media concerning a lot of those that were not true. The point that we can learn from that is don't be influenced by what we know is negative. And so we need to remember that. Very good point. Okay, fill in the blanks. Number 1, the word beam, which is Dacus, denotes what?
Stick.
A A stick of timber. What else did he use? A saw log. This is in section 3, point number 6, I believe it is. And then he goes on to say, whereas the word mote, which is karphus, denotes speck, a twig, yeah, dry stalk, splinter. So he used several illustrations there.
Doesn't that illustrate that Jesus had a sense of humor? You think about somebody with a beam sticking out of his eye trying to stick a mote out somebody else's.
Yeah, the physical or the mental picture you can get from that sometimes can be very interesting. Is this a common problem? What did he say?
What's the question?
Is this a common problem?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, Bobby says. And he says we have. It's a common problem that we have. Notice he includes us in that. We have a greater fault, which is a log in the eye, while trying to remove a lesser fault, a speck from our neighbor's eye. Okay, number 2. We got some passages there that are text stating that God is the judge. What are those passages?
1 Corinthians 4, 3 through 5.
1 Corinthians 4, 3 through 5. Romans 14, 4. Romans 14, 10. Romans 14, 12. James 4, 12. And again, this comes from section 4, point 4. Mr. Winkler made the statement that judging then is an infringement on the prerogative of God, thus put down the gavel. I like that statement. It's an infringement on the prerogative of God, put down the gavel. And again, as we looked at those, that it's the Lord who judges, 1 Corinthians 4, verse 4. Each one of us is going to receive his commendation from God, 1 Corinthians 4, 5. And so on down through there. James 4:12 says, there's only one lawgiver and judge. What else did he say about that? That there's only one lawgiver and judge. James 4:12.
Is that where he said, who are we to judge another?
No, he says he is able to save and to destroy, but who are you to judge your neighbor? So it's a warning there regarding us. Okay, number 3 is statement from J.W. McGarvey. And he said that we should not be consortiously judicial, but discriminately judicious. What does consortiously mean? How's that again? Yeah, being critical, severely critical, is one of the definitions to it. Given to censure, fault finding, I like that particular word used there. What about discriminately? What does that mean?
Careful with judge.
Okay. Well, it's a distinction. When you're talking about being discriminant, you're making a distinction between two things, either against it or for it. What about judicious?
Thoughtful.
Okay. Having, exercising, or characterized by sound judgment is the definition of that. So the point being here is what?
Be careful.
Be careful. Scott?
I was going to say, maybe Brent mentioned this, or maybe there's a different context, but I thought about when he said slow down. That applies here too. We just had, remember we talked about the example I gave and the examples maybe that you gave. Somebody put something out that's negative or critical about somebody else. We shouldn't instantly believe it just because it's said, or maybe just because maybe we'd like the individual that said it. To be judicious means that you need to gather all the information. We've talked about this before in this lesson. We've got to slow down, and I'm talking to myself, Gerald, because I messed up on this one time this week, and I'm ashamed. I made a quick judgment, and I didn't have all the information. I found out I didn't have all the information, and we can be so quick to judge and criticize others that we might find out, oh my word, I didn't know about that, and it changes everything.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the title of this lesson, by the way? Overcoming harsh judgments and fault finding. And certainly that's what we need to keep in mind as we're going down through this. Okay, number 4, that life is an echo, that we will reap what we sow is emphasized in, what are the passages? Galatians 6, verses 7 and 8. Matthew 5, 7. James 2:13. Matthew 18, 21 through 35. This comes from section 6.1. Mark went down through all of these in class. Galatians 6, 7 basically tells us whatever we sow, we're going to reap. Matthew 5, 7 is what? Blessed are the merciful. We need to be show mercy. James 2:13 says mercy triumphs over judgment. And Matthew 18 through 30, on verse 34, says, in anger his master delivered him to the jailers. Who's he talking about? That's Matthew 18, 33 through 35.
The master on the harsh servant.
Okay, the master and the harsh servant. Remember the servant that owed his master an amount that could never have been repaid in a lifetime. And the master forgave him. The servant then goes out and finds a fellow servant who owed him a small amount of money and turned him over to the authorities, to the jailers. And so what happened? The master rescinded his original statement that he'd made to the first servant and turned him over that he to be tormented until he could pay everything, which certainly would not have happened. Okay, number 5. The sharp barbs of harsh criticism and censorious judgment wound and discourage. Section 5, point number 7. So, any questions or comments on fill in the blanks? Okay, locate. Number 1. Measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise.
2 Corinthians 10, 13.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians 10, 12, section 2.2 is where that came from. Do you recall what Mr. Winkler said in that particular section? What he said was, we cannot whitewash ourselves while blackening others. What did he mean by that?
Making ourselves look good while we're trying to make others look bad.
Okay, very, very good. We do a lot of trying to make someone look very bad because we think that'll make us look good, and that's just not it. And as Paul said there, that comparing themselves among themselves, they are not wise. And if you look up that particular Greek word, it's soninyami, which means to put together, that is mentally to comprehend, by implication to act piously. And then Strong uses some of the words to define it as consider, understand, and be wise. So we find then in 2 Corinthians 10:12 in the ESV, instead of using the word wise, the ESV uses the phrase, they are without understanding.
In context, they were really being very harsh on Paul, saying his letters are weighty and powerful, but in public presence is weak and his speech is contemptible. That was their judgment of the Apostle Paul.
Right. And the point that Paul was making here is, do we or should we classify or compare ourselves to others? No. So again, because sometimes the others are doing what? They're commending themselves. So it's not a wise basis or a wise thing to look for to try to see how we compare. Okay, number 2, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. 1 Peter 4:8. What's another word for charity? Love, okay. And above all, keeping loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. That's the ESV in verse 8. When it comes to those that have wronged us, how does love come into play? Forgiveness. Very good. When one loves another, he forgives. And so Peter admonished that love be what? What does he mean? They shall cover a multitude of sins. Love shall cover a multitude of sins.
When you truly love, you're not quick to jump to conclusions, and you don't want to believe it when you truly love.
Okay. If you love, you're not quick to jump to conclusions, and you want to really believe, if you love. Actually, Peter here, when he says it covers a multitude of sins, what do you get mentally from that, a picture from that word covers? Holding? Forbearing? When you cover, you take a tarp out, for example, and, let's use the illustration of baseball games. Right now, there's been a lot of baseball games that have been delayed or postponed because of rain. What do they do when they delay that game? They take tarp and cover the field. So when it talks here about cover the multitudes of sins, love covers all the sins. So it's a good illustration there. And
That's what God has done for us when we obey the gospel.
absolutely, what God did for us when we obeyed the gospel. So Peter's really saying, basically, above all things, that we need to have love.
David wrote in Psalm 32, "Blessed is he whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered."
Okay. Mark quoted there Psalms 32. So again, love covers a lot of things, and we need to, if we have love in our life, how likely are we to have harsh judgments and fault finding? If we have true love in our life, above all things. If we have true love in our life, which here he's pointing out is above all things, how does that relate to our harsh judgments and fault finding?
Mentioning the word true love.
Yes, it's true love, right. There is appearance of love, and sometimes it's not true love. But yeah, and again, it's that it will cover a multitude of sins.
And if it's covered, it's no longer seen.
If it's covered, it's no longer seen. Good point. Very good point. Okay, number 3. Though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. 2 Corinthians 4:16. That comes from section 4.5. That's the King James Version. It says the outward man shall not perish. Some of the other translations use different words. What are they?
Wasting away.
Wasting away. That's what the ESV uses that. Our inner self is being renewed day by day. What do we see? The outward man or the inward man?
We see the outward man.
We see the outward man. So again, we need to keep that in mind. Again, looking at what Mr. Winkler said, commenting on this particular point, he said, what a difference it would make in our judgment of others if we could only see beneath the surface, seeing their motives, intents, inner battles, and desires. All right, number 4, examine yourselves.
2 Corinthians 13:5.
Okay, 2 Corinthians 13:5, which says, examine yourselves. 1 Corinthians 11:28 says, let a person examine himself then, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. So there's more than one passage that we can use from that. This came from section 5.4. Again, looking at Mr. Winkler's comments on this section, do you remember what he said? When we're looking for faults, what should we use? What did he say in that section? Should we use a mirror or should we use a telescope? A mirror. I thought, again, that was a very, it's a very interesting statement. When we normally are looking for faults in others, what are we using? Well, a telescope, and I might say a microscope. We're really wanting to get down into the gritty details. But he's saying,
Not what they've done.
yeah, but he's saying we're to do what? Use a mirror. What does he mean by that?
See what you're doing.
Yeah, examine yourself first. Yeah.
Unfortunately, when we walk away from the mirror, we forget what we've seen.
Unfortunately, when we walk away from the mirror, we forget what we've seen. And so, again, that's another good point to make. Okay, number 5. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye? Matthew 7:3. Okay. Section 1.2 is where he puts this. Fault finding without evidence. How should we view that?
Something we shouldn't do.
Something we shouldn't do. Actually, it's forbidden by the Scriptures. We need to examine ourselves first, and we need to keep that in mind. All right, answer in a few words. List 6 kinds of judging that Jesus does not forbid. This comes from section 1.1 and starts with ABC and on down through. What is the first one?
Judgments in civil courts.
Judgment in civil courts. So why doesn't God forbid that?
Because he authorized that judgment himself.
He authorizes that judgment himself. What's the passage that our author used and Mark discussed? Yeah, Romans 13, 1 through 7. The very first statement says what?
Everyone must submit to governing authorities.
Okay, everyone is subject to the governing authorities. So who does that include? All of us. None of us are exempt. Then down in verse 5, he says, therefore one must be in subjection not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. Right, one's conscience. Now that conscience has to be trained properly, but again, so we're not only to be in subject because of God's wrath, but also not to violate our own conscience. What's the second one in our list?
The church upon disorderly members.
Yeah, church's judgment on disorderly members. And 2 Thessalonians 3:6, but we command you, brethren, in the name of the Lord Jesus, that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly, and not according to the tradition which he received from us. So he does not forbid that. What's the next one?
Individual judgment that we make up.
Okay, individual judgments of wrongdoers and evil people. Now notice the classification there. God does not forbid individual judgments of those that are evil and their wrongdoing. Matthew 7, verses 15 through 16. Again, Mark covered this. What does that passage talk about?
They wear false teachers.
Okay, why?
So they come in sheep's clothing, and order their ravening wolves.
Okay, they come in sheep's clothing. They're inwardly ravenous wolves. How are you going to recognize them?
By their fruits.
By their fruits. And he uses that illustration there. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? What about 3 John 1:9? What do we have there? A very,
I believe those Diotrephes.
yeah, Diotrephes. A very, an example of what not to be. And that was Diotrephes, who put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority, according to John. How about Titus 3:10? What did Paul tell Titus?
Reject and devise of man after the first and second admonition.
Okay, yeah. Reject the person that causes division after you have warned him once or twice. And then do what? Avoid him, or as the ESV says, have nothing more to do with him. So they're to be totally, no association there at all. Okay, what's our next one?
Recognizing and disapproving the faults of others.
Okay. Yeah, this is one of the judgments that Jesus does not forbid. Notice it says recognize. That becomes first. And then disapproving the fault of others. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1. Very popular passage.
Somebody, this is, the men be overtaken of the fault. You that is spirit to restore him in the spirit of meekness.
Right. Yeah. If anyone's caught any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness or meekness. Right. And then he goes on to say what?
Keep watch on yourself lest you be tempted.
Yeah. Keep watch on yourself lest you be tempted. Very good. Yes.
Just a quick comment on the Galatians 6 and this subject right here. I don't think any of us really enjoy being corrected. It's not fun to have our faults pointed out. And I think that one of the keys here on this one is that we emphasize it's not just correcting the faults of others, it's doing it properly.
Right.
Like Bobby quoted, it's with a spirit of gentleness, obviously humility too, because if you're considering yourself, you're not coming across haughty or self-righteous. I mean, you approach that with the wrong attitude, and we all probably have had someone correct us with the wrong approach, and it just tends to make you very defensive and run away. It hurts so bad to have someone talking to you that way, even if you are wrong about whatever they said,
Right. Yeah, we got to keep in mind that as Paul pointed out here to the Galatians, that we need to keep a watch on ourselves because we can be what? We can be tempted. It may be whatever the fault that the brother has, we might be tempted by the same thing or something similar. And so that's one reason that he puts that in there.
I think in the case in Galatians chapter 6, the men is overtaken. It's not that he determined ahead of time that he's going to deliver this sin.
Right.
But he's caught up in something that he inadvertently got himself in.
Right. And that's the point that Paul's trying to get us to understand, that we too can fall into that particular situation if we are not careful. So we need to keep watch on ourselves. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, decisive preaching that draws the line between truth and error, the lost and the saved, that is not forbidden by God. And again, we have 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. And what's Peter talking about there?
False teachers.
Okay, false teachers, false prophets. So they rose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who brought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. Many will follow their sensuality, and because of the way of the truth will be blasphemed, and in their greed they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destination or their destruction is not asleep. Decisive preaching. That never goes on, does it, Mark? How many times does Mark point this out to us? That what's happening among the brethren from time to time that ends up being decisive. I guess it's from the very beginning. It's always been a problem. Okay, and our last one?
False teachers.
Okay, what about false teachers? Identifying false teachers. So we are not forbidden to do that. 1 John 4:1 tells us to what?
Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God.
Okay, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. And Paul told the Thessalonians what in 5:21? Okay. ESV puts it this way, but test everything, hold fast to what is good. And I kind of like that way ESV uses it there. And again, we are to identify false teachers. I've heard among some of the brethren criticize preachers for pointing out some other preachers who are teaching a false doctrine. And yet, what does John tell us here? And what Paul also?
If we don't point it out, others are going to be deceived about them and led astray.
Right, absolutely. So we have that obligation, actually.
Gerald?
Yes.
You just kind of hit me. Back to the example of the Bereans.
Mm-hmm.
Paul wasn't offended that they searched the scriptures daily to make sure he was preaching the truth. So just imagine if Paul was like some of the brethren you just mentioned. Wait, you're checking up on me? I'm Paul the apostle. What are you doing? You know, Paul knew that he was human and he can mess up, and he prayed. The Bereans were praised that they searched the scriptures to make sure he was preaching the truth.
Very good. Scott brings out the example of the Bereans searching the scriptures to make sure what Paul was preaching was the truth. And that's a good example for us to think about. Okay.
I might add to that too. We have to be very, very careful in how we deal with someone we may deem a false teacher. First of all, we need to be very, very clear that we give evidence of that. And secondly, they need to be of such reputation that we, and Bobby was getting at this, such reputation that we need to warn about them. So if you don't know who they are, it doesn't have much pull. But if they are of such reputation that their name will lend credence to what they say, and they're saying something's wrong, then that needs to be brought out. But we have to be very, very careful about doing that.
Now, Mark brings out the fact that we have to be careful when we do this. Number one, if the person is influential, especially among the brotherhood, people have a tendency just simply to believe them because of who they are. And if they will accept whatever they're teaching, come to mind a few examples over the years of some well-known preachers that others had to take task to because they were wrong on a particular issue. And it continues today. Okay, number two, what kind of judging does Jesus forbid? Okay, this comes from section 1.2. He says the kind of judging forbidden by the Lord is harsh, hasty, unfounded, censorious, or fault-finding, hypocritical, uncharitable, malicious, slanderous, ill-natured judgment. Wow, what a list. Number three, how does Moffat render 1 Corinthians 13:7? 1 Corinthians 13:7 says, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That's the ESV version. And what Moffat said, love is always slow to expose, always eager to believe the best, always hopeful, always patient. Number four, why is the censorious judge called a hypocrite? What is a censorious judge? A fault-finding judge. Okay, that's a good way to put it. Why is he a hypocrite?
Because he can't see his own faults.
Okay. Yeah, he a lot of times exercise judgment without the right to do so. And so his judgments then end up being destructive, maybe defamation of character. In Matthew 7:1-5, what is that illustration there? The log and the mote. And verse 5 says such a person is a hypocrite. Number 5, what four things prompt or cause judging?
Self-centered.
An effort to divert attention from one's own sins. And who's the example that he gave?
Judas accused Mary of wastefulness.
Yeah. An example of Judas from John chapter 12, verses 4-6. Verse 6, talking about Judas, said, he said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. What's the second one? The effort to justify his own sinful conduct and console one's own conscience. And he used 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12 for that, which says, we dare not class ourselves or compare ourselves with those who commend themselves. And so we need to be careful of that. What's the next one?
Build up self while tearing others down.
Yeah, intent to build up self while tearing others down. And Luke 18:9 through 14. Does anybody know what that passage is? That's the prayer of the Pharisee versus who? The tax collector, right. And so, again, the prayer of the Pharisee definitely was an intent to build himself up. Our next one? Envy and hatred. What examples did he give?
Saul and David.
Yeah, Saul sought to kill David. What was the other one? Yeah, Haman built a gallows to hang Mordecai on. Didn't work out too well for Haman, did it? All right, multiple choice. Rachel, Hannah, or Elizabeth? Hannah was unjustly judged of being drunken according to Luke 12:57, Matthew 15:1 and following, or 1 Samuel 1:12 and following. Okay, 1 Samuel 1:12 and following. It's actually in verse 13. Okay. Judas, Thomas, Peter. Accused Mary, Salome, Martha. Mary. Of wastefulness according to Luke 18:9 through 14, John 12:5 through 6, Mark 2 through 7. Yeah, John 12:5 through 6. And in this accusation, his motives were proper or improper? Improper. Very good. Number 3, the golden rule is located in 1 Timothy 1:13, Acts 9:26 through 31, Matthew 7 through 12. Matthew 7 through 12. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. Ezekiel had to sit 5, 7, 10. 7 days where the people sat before warning them. That's from Ezekiel 3:15. The censorious judge will or will not receive all judgment in this life. Will not. Right. Matthew 12:36, on the day of judgment, all people are going to give account for every careless word that they speak. Okay, how does envy seek to hurt and destroy its victim?
To destroy the person and make them feel bad.
Okay. Yeah, it just tries to destroy the victim by hurting or wounding and stabbing with unfounded harsh or statements. Number 2, can you give an additional example of cases in which if all the facts were known, people's judgment of the individual would have been otherwise? Mr. Winkler gave a couple examples. Do you remember what they were? Mark talked about them. About the impatient traveler telling the father with a crying baby to take it to his mother and not knowing the mother was dead.
And the dog came back bloody.
And the dog came back bloodied, and he killed the dog because he thought the dog had harmed the missing child, but only to find out later that the dog had killed the panther in protecting the child. What are some other examples?
Harold, one of the best I ever heard was if, let's say, I'll pick on Mark. I think he needs to be picked on, but he picks on me all the time. If I drove by a ABC Liquor and I saw Mark's car parked in front of it, and just instantly assumed that Mark was a drunk, I think I would be absolutely guilty.
Okay.
Of judging him improperly. But if I came by and Mark's car was there and Mark is over the front of the car and I got out and talked to him and I definitely could tell he was drunk, then that would be different. But again, to judge him just because his car is sitting there, he might be broken down, he might be in an emergency, he might be using the phone, the bathroom, who knows? We don't know. That's improper judging.
Right. Yeah, that's, Scott uses an example of somebody's car being in front of a bar and just assuming that the driver of that car is inside drinking without knowing why the car is there. There's a couple more examples we can think of from the scriptures. How about Acts 17:28 through 30? That's where Paul was accused of taking a Gentile into the temple. Was that true? No. How about Job? What about his friends?
They accused him of being wrong.
Yeah. We have a couple examples there. Very quickly, what does judging do to the mote hunter? For one example, reveals truth about the one seeking to do the judging. Also, we find out he attempts to whitewash his own sins and shortcomings. He fails to be the salt that a Christian should be, and it could result in his own eternal damnation. And then the only thing that was left are the mark our Bibles, and I like to call these memory verses. Why are those important?
Marking them draws our attention to them.
Marking them draws our attention to them. Matthew 7, 1 through 6. And what's that teaching on?
Judge not, that you be not judged.
Judge, be not judged. James 4, 11.
Don't speak evil of your brother.
If we judge our brother, we judge the law. However, we are to be doers of the law and not judges, what that passage teaches. How about John 7, 24?
Judge not by appearance, but righteous judgment.
Yeah, judge not by according to appearance, but righteous judgment. Okay. Lord willing, then, we can start lesson number 5 next week.
Because that last verse, judging is commanded. Righteous judgment is commanded.
Righteous judgment is commanded. That's the point that we need to realize. And then our judgments have to be righteous to be acceptable.